English translation, 440th contact. Tuesday, 16th of January, 2007, 23:17 hours.
You are faster than me again, but be greeted, dear friend.
Eduard, my greetings to you too. Even when I called you, I was here in your workroom.
Oh, I see. I thought you were just on your way here. You came in order to inquire as to what has happened since yesterday. Well, I have passed everything along as we discussed it together. The whole thing has been well received and has also borne good fruit, which I now hope will not fall to the ground again immaturely, but really ripen.
I am reassured. But nevertheless, the following is still to be discussed with Christian K. and with possible participants with regard to assistance. You must also make it clear to him that the separation must be a final act without any ifs and buts, because only this can be beneficial for him. A half-hearted action and not strict separation does not solve the problem, but lets it continue in the old tracks and further lets things get out of control of the good human nature. The possibility of a different regulation than the very quick and final separation does not exist, as I have seen in the future. So bare reason and bare intellect are required, from which the right and appropriate course of action must be taken. If this does not happen, then the whole thing takes the form of a complete psyche-based destruction which has already progressed to such an extent that it is difficult to remedy. In addition, there is a certain bondage as well as a strange dependency from which he absolutely must free himself. Otherwise, the whole thing endangers the process of success. In addition to the fact that insidious attempts are made by the other side to stop the process of detachment and to maintain or restore the old state. He has to realize this, act accordingly, and leave any private contact be. In fact, it is about his psyche and physical health and his existence in life, but also about his existence and progress with regard to his professional existence, which he should definitely consider and develop, as my future review showed. The existing connection is also the biggest obstacle to this, which is why it must be solved in every respect if success is to be achieved. However, even in the event of a disentanglement, there is still the danger from the other side that attempts to retrieve and restore the old state of affairs will be considered in private contacts, which is why private contacts should be avoided at all costs. Of course, the whole thing is a private matter and is in Christian's will, so we cannot tell him what to do in this matter, but only give him advice. What he ultimately makes of it all is up to him. However, it is advisable for him to listen to our advice and to use his rationality as well as his intellect, and thus to act within the right framework. This, on your part, is absolutely necessary to make an explanation for him, with the remark that he has really reached that point where it is necessary to really put everything on the right track, or to finally wither away. It would be a pleasure for me if he acted according to my and your advice, and if you would express my dearest thanks to all those involved in the matter and who give their commitment and help.
That goes without saying, as well as, and I anticipate this, I am sure everyone would thank you for your advice.
For which they also deserve my thanks.
Ptaah reads the emails.
A little long-winded questions, yes, and you want to answer them?
That is what I have in mind, in a special bulletin to be published in March or so.
Then I am interested in your answer if you wrote it. I am sure you will have them ready by the 3rd of February.
You are good, my son, because I cannot wait until then because everything still has to go through the proof sheet when it is finished. So I have already worked out the answer. If you want to read it? The questions are integrated, of course.
Of course, that interests me. May I see?
I have not made a printout yet, so the whole thing is still in the computer. Please sit down here on my chair when I have turned on the device and clicked on the file. So that is done. Please sit down.
Ptaah follows the prompt and begins to read.
Thanks.
Questions, dear Honourable Mr. Meyer. Uncorrected original questions.
I saw your internet site today, and I noticed that you reject angels and guardian angels as invented by religions. But the fact is that angels appear in the oldest records of humankind. The Indian Vedas and Puranas people make wars with demons, etc. But there they are not called angels, but gods, or better devatas or devas, more in the sense of embodied natural laws, of which there are 5 main ones: Devi, Shiva, Vishnu, Surya, and Ganesha, from whose common basis, pure being, the whole creation is to arise and then be administered by them and their millions of subordinate laws, or devas. Since there are serious angel appearances and healings through them in the West, I assume that the omnipresent devas, or laws of nature, may not reject the Western concept of angels and may use it because they somehow want to help the ignorant and seekers when they are called upon. The effects of worshipping and invoking natural laws or devas in the Vedas still have scientifically verifiable results even today, and manifestations and incarnations of the main devas occur again and again: Krishna, Rama, etc. Even manifestations of the Devi or Divine Mother seen by whole peoples are described more often. I think your rejection of angels is out of place if you do not simultaneously bring enlightenment about the laws of nature and the truth about the possibilities of favoring the laws of nature, for example, to attune one's consciousness to their common basis, pure being. What do your extraterrestrial contacts say about this? In an article in the magazine 2000 Special 11-230 UFOs and Crop Circles, I read about you that you apparently said, "The Pleiaren are enormously susceptible, uncontrolled, illogical, etc. If they get in contact with normal Earth humans, and then accidents can happen." If this is true, in my opinion, the Pleiaren are not founded in being. What good is the best wisdom, etc., if it is not expressed in physical, emotional, and spiritual stability? Namely, maintaining equanimity, reason, love, etc., even under the most adverse circumstances. I think they could still learn a lot, don't you? How do you feel about Sheldon Neidl saying he channels Syrians? And of Mike Quincy, who supposedly channels Saint Germain and people from Venus and other planets and systems? And what about Franz Barden? Was he a weirdo? I would appreciate an answer, even if it is only short. Many thanks in advance. With kind regards, Johannes Buchholz, currently in Holland.
Answer. It is clear to me from your questions that you are a man of faith in relation to the Vedic Vedas, but that does not change the fact that your questions can be answered if you are able to bear the hard truth, which is somewhat different from the old teachings of the Vedas, whose real origin lies in the Nocademian spiritual teaching, aka creation energy teaching, which was taught in India some 13,500 years ago, but which was thoroughly falsified due to misunderstanding and misconceptions, as well as due to delusion and deliberate deception, and became a structure of pure fantasy with regard to demigods, deities, being, demons and angels, etc., as is the case with Christianity and, in certain forms, Buddhism, Theosophy, esotericism, and all kinds of sects. The effective truth is not that which is today suggestively and erroneously chewed up and preached to humans in complicated forms by religions and sects, but the effective truth rests in the simple simplicity of the spiritual teaching, which also includes the teaching of the truth and the teaching of the life. You want to know the effective truth, and I will present it to you in a hard-hitting way, and you may or may not use it for reflection and effective truth-finding. only one more thing should be said about it. You should not feel offended when you are hit by the hard truth, as it is usually always the case, because it is just not endured, because it does not fit into the worldview of faith, which humans cherish and cultivate and cannot free themselves from, in order to turn to the effective truth. On the contrary, they begin to scold and blaspheme about the effective truth, as well as about those who bring and teach the irrefutable truth. The fact is that believers are usually unable to free themselves from their religious or sectarian heresies, and therefore curse the truth. And if they nevertheless make an effort to lend their ear and consciousness to the effective truth, only a very slow and lengthy process can lead to real knowledge and acceptance. And this is because humans do not consciously make a truthful effort to acquire knowledge and wisdom, but in relation to them, they remain only in a belief that is unprovable for all time, contrary to the truth that proves itself. It must also be said that a person who adheres to a religious faith does so not simply because they are seduced to do so by false religious and sectarian teachings and their preachers, etc., but because all faith is inherited through parents. To question 1 is as follows. Angels have been a product of human fantasy and delusion since time immemorial, so that angels have never appeared to any human being, nor have they been demigods or gods in the sense of erroneous religious teachings. So gods respectively, angels or devatas respectively, devas, never appeared as embodied laws of nature and never had any effect, because these figures correspond to pure earthly human fantasy products, or even schizophrenic delusions. Creation, the universal consciousness, did not emerge from a common basis of the 5 deity Devi, Shiva, Vishnu, Surya, and Ganesha, but as an idea and origin from the You Are creation, according to which creation created itself out of itself. The creation is not identical with the creations, beings and life forms, etc., that have emerged from it, but it is itself the universal consciousness, the being, from which everything in our universe originates, and into which everything also enters again. So the truth is that everything comes out of the creation, the universal consciousness, and is determined solely by the creational natural laws. And these laws say that there are neither gods nor angels, demons or spirits, etc., who determine life, who could neither be called upon nor bring help to humans, etc. Basically, the human being is self-determining, self-generating and responsible for everything and anything, because there are no higher powers in any respect that would protect him or her, help them, or give them any orders or regulations, etc. Different doctrines of sects, philosophies and religions correspond to schizophrenic constructs of lies, which were invented by humans who were mentally ill or by deceitful people in order to drive believers into their clutches. For this purpose, gods, demons, spirits, angels and saints have been invented, as well as extremely unrealistic and crazy heresies regarding alleged higher levels of consciousness, pure being, reincarnations as animal form, and such nonsense. We recommend reading the book Wiedergeburt, Leben, Sterben, Tod und Trauer, Wasser-Mahnzeit Verlag, in which the real and true facts from the real and unadulterated spiritual teaching are mentioned. Neither the fantasy figures Krishna and Rama nor the Divine Mother Devi could or can manifest before individuals or the whole people, because what does not exist cannot be manifested. What individual people and the whole people supposedly saw was in each case only illusion, suggestively hypnotically created by gurus and the like. Truthfully, only universal consciousness or creation and the absolute forms exist as being, whereby only the highest absolute form, being absolute, can be called the state of pure being. Thus, the state of pure being cannot be attained by a deity, even if the deity would stand high above all human beings in terms of knowledge, love and wisdom, etc. A deity was and always is a normal human being who only bears the title God or Goddess because his or her state of knowledge, love and wisdom is superior to the fellow human beings. Further, it must be said that the omnipresent laws of nature do not integrate themselves into subordinate laws, because the entire laws of nature are complex and a block, which is well thought out and based on the law of causality. Thus, everything is continuously self-determining, and this from every cause, which according to the creational natural law results in a very specific effect. These things alone are verifiable and recognizable by humans, and thus also by the sciences, but not unreal things, such as alleged apparitions and incarnations or reincarnations of unreal chief devatas or avatars, such as Babaji, who among misguided believers is traded as an embodiment of the divine himself, herself, or the god Shiva, and is contradictorily glorified, on the one hand, as a great destroyer, and on the other hand, as a renewer, as well as a great leader of humankind in secret. In truth, however, every avatar is nothing more than an ordinary human being, who, however, presumes to be the incarnation or reincarnation of an alleged god. Your opinion that my rejection of angels would be misplaced if I did not simultaneously bring enlightenment about natural laws and the truth about possibilities of favoring the laws of nature. For example, to attune one's consciousness to their common basis, pure being, then your speech is a bit confusing, because the whole does not harmonize together. This is especially so because, despite the negation with regard to angels, I teach the facts of the spiritual teaching also with regard to the truth of the effective possibilities of favoring the laws of nature. So the whole thing forms a common basis, namely the rejection of angels, gods and demons, etc., because they are schizophrenic and belief-based fantasy figures, namely the representation of the teaching of the truth, as well as the teaching of the favorable treatment of the laws of nature, if they are correctly followed. With this, however, it is not possible for error and falsehood to attune oneself to the pure being, for this is not possible for any human being, even if he or she has the rank of an Ishvish or Shrut. The latter is classified in the highest possible form of the evolution of consciousness that a human being can achieve before he or she puts down their material body and dives into the purely spiritual planes, of which there is no longer any connection to the material world and to human beings. Consequently, incarnations or reincarnations into the material world can no longer take place from the spiritual planes. For very specific and special reasons, this was only possible once a second series of reincarnations into the material plane, in relation to Nocodemion during the existence of creation, or the approximately 46 trillion-year-old universe, but this was only possible through the pure spirit-level Arahat Arthasata in cooperation with the highest, pure spirit-level Ptaah Li. 12 billion years ago, this has since been revised to be 12 million, due to the very close similarity in the symbols of million versus. To question 2. What was written in the magazine 2000, allegedly? It does not correspond to the true facts of the matter, because it was never said or written by me that the Pleiaren were uncontrolled or illogical. The truth of the matter is that the Pleiaren are much more subtle in their conscious and psychical swinging waves than the terrestrial human beings, who are still extremely coarse and uncouth in this respect due to their defective consciousness evolution. For this reason, they come into distress when they fall into the still very deficient swinging wave range of the Earth humans in terms of consciousness. The comparison is, for example, as if a consciously very highly gifted and highly evolved Earth human would have to stay in the area of the highest degree of consciousness madness, complete idiots in the sense of mentally ill, as the Earth human mistakenly says. Sooner or later he or she would go crazy because they are not compatible with consciousness lunatics of this kind. The comparison is a bit crass, but the whole thing must be seen in this context. So your speech. If this is true, in my opinion the Pleiaren are not founded in being, what good is the best wisdom, etc., if it is not expressed in physical, emotional, and spiritual terms. I think they could still learn a lot, could they not? Has no foundation, and is truly more than just arrogant and stupid. Because obviously you are so lost in the Vedic heresies that you can no longer see the forest for the trees and cannot find your way out of it into the light of reality and truth. And your word grounded in being, I have already explained that there is no possibility whatsoever for the human being to be grounded in being, because this a purely spiritual being state, which is what it is only inherent and possible in the creation itself and in the absolute forms, but not in a human being, nor in an angel, god, or demons, etc., which obviously take on great importance in your faith. Maintaining of the equanimity, the rationality and love, as well as psychical, emotional and consciousness-based mistakenly called by you in your ignorance of what consciousness and spirit are, spiritual, stability, etc. under the most adverse circumstances, has nothing to do with the subtlety of the evolution of consciousness and psyche, but only with the swinging waves that arise from thoughts and feelings and emotions. It must also be clear that feelings and emotions are two different things and have nothing in common. But this is obviously unknown to you. If an electrical apparatus is taken as a comparison, to which a certain number of volts, amperes, hertz, and watts is assigned, then it can function perfectly with it. But if it is supplied with impure energies, for example too high or too low, the apparatus will be damaged. The same comparison applies to the Pleiaren, as well as to the Earth humans, and in the case of the Earthlings, also with regard to their dealings with each other. If, for example, one person is spiteful, aggressive, dishonest and evil towards another, etc., then the latter inevitably takes damage to the consciousness, to the thoughts and feelings, as well as to the psyche, that is to say, the whole mental block, if he or she does not move away from the area of the attacker. This should be enough to explain the situation. To question 3. Channeling is absolute nonsense in every respect, therefore no Earth human can boast about it. Either an assertion of alleged channeling is a deliberate deception or charlatanism, while not infrequently, there is a schizophrenic delusion that makes people claim and believe that they are capable of channeling. So if this Sheldon Nidal, unknown as the other two, claims to channel with Syrians, or this Mike Quasi with Saint-Germain, or the aforementioned Franz Baden, then there is a complete baloney and nonsense behind it, because the esoterically invented channeling is based on pure fantasy, on delusion, or on conscious deception. And to Saint-Germain, this occultist, alchemist, and adventurer, who also called himself the Count, died in 1784, which means he can neither wander the world again nor be channeled. It is well known that after dying, the personality is dissolved by the overall consciousness block into pure neutral energy, from which the overall consciousness block creates a completely new personality with a completely new consciousness. It is this new form of consciousness personality, which no longer has any relation to the former form of consciousness personality, that is then born, together with the reincarnation of the spirit form, to which the total consciousness block also belongs. See rebirth, life, dying, death and sorrow, Wasser man seit Verlag. So it is absolutely impossible that personality who lived before can be reborn or reincarnated, because the old teachings of Hinduism and Buddhism, etc., are pure charlatanism, just like the false teaching that the human spirit or personality and its consciousness can be reborn in an animal form.
Reader's question uncorrected original questions.
I am now pretty much through with your internet pages, and thank you for the inspiration and knowledge. Even if I do not agree with a few points completely, the solutions you offer could be deepened by additions with Eastern wisdom, because you can rarely change humans with your suggestions. If they want to be convinced with words, not even with good intentions or counseling, recommendations, etc., humans rarely change, because most of them have no choice, no power, and no opportunity to grow consciously and make changes in their personal or social life due to their dullness and sluggishness of intellect. Stress and its deposits in the body and the associated blockages on a spiritual level, as well as wrong lifestyle, unfavorable environment and education. True changes can only be achieved by turning from a purely materialistic life to inner vision, by practical exercises to expand the individual mind to the cosmic mind, by the concrete experience of the all-pervading eternal state of being Atma, Brahman, the universal existence as you wonderfully describe it. With a little practice, the mind will be impregnated by this new experience, just like a cloth that you immerse again and again in the color in being and place in the sun to dry. Exposed to activity until the color being no longer fades even under the most adverse circumstances and remains stable. Only then one does everything correctly or lives automatically in harmony with the cosmic state of being, in harmony with all natural laws. Fortunately, the Vedic tradition of India has preserved the realization of this possibility at all times through deep transcendental meditation techniques that are not based on or presupposed faith, worldview, religion, but purely on the inner laws of the human mind. In addition, there have always been peace meditations and techniques that have been practiced in large groups by thousands of humans in one place and have brought about earth-shattering changes. Because when a sufficiently large number of human beings radiate the experience of universal existence, of the omnipresent state of being, of the all-embracing consciousness in one place, the collective consciousness automatically changes as well, and there is a constant neutralization of the negative and growth of the positive social tendencies. This has been reported historically in India over and over again and can be proven today by scientific experiments. As far as I know, this will be practiced again by Vedic Pandits in India and other continents until the middle of the year, and can be proven by scientific research statistics, repeatable experiments, etc. I wish you and all humans courage and confidence in a better future. Johannes Buchholz, Germany.
Answer. You think that the solutions that I offer could be deepened by adding Eastern wisdom, etc. In this respect, you are very much mistaken, because the Eastern wisdom basically originated in early times from the effective spiritual teachings I teach, and these were, just like Christianity and the other religions, falsified beyond recognition, with the Veda teachings being the worst forms of falsification alongside those of the Christianity. Moreover, it must be said that many of the Eastern wisdoms are usually as extremely banal and childish as many of the Western and Oriental philosophies, etc. An immense number of religious and sectarian as well as philosophical heresies are still being spread even today in the so-called enlightened modern age, and are being taken up by willing believers, which is a fact that also proceeds from your questions and statements. You speak, for example, of a spiritual blockade which is absolutely illusory, because the spirit can neither be blocked nor attacked, because it is a pure creational energy, which regarding any attacks from the side of humans in an absolute taboo, therefore the spirit cannot become ill with spiritual illness. This is only possible with the material consciousness, because only this can be damaged or attacked by illness, etc., but never the spirit in the human being, because it is purely creational and inviolable. So it is also only the consciousness of the human being that can learn, create ideas, and evolve and create consciousness-based property. The spiritual teaching that I am presenting is in no wise based on trying to convince with words, as is the case with the Veda teachings, the Bible, and all other religious and sectarian teachings. Obviously, you are not familiar with the spiritual teaching of the truth, and teaching of the life, so you cannot judge what the true teaching is. The teaching consists of 365 letters of instruction and about 40 books and many small letters. It does not have any persuasions, good intentions, counseling or erroneous recommendations, etc., by which humans are to change. So you are also greatly mistaken in this respect, for the spiritual teaching whereby the spirit is related to everything creational and not to consciousness, but consciousness is educated by the teaching of the creational laws, is directed to completely different and extremely valuable things. That you accuse most humans of the dullness and sluggishness of the intellect, and thus of the dullness and sluggishness of rationality and understanding in the context of how you do this, is extremely alarming and arrogant, for it indicates that you think better than you are, and that you elevate yourself high-handedly above the dull and sluggish. Unfortunately, you are only partly right that most humans are suggestively misinformed from childhood on by a wrong upbringing and a wrong environment, which prevents them from growing consciously and from making changes in their personal or social life through stress. Basically, every person is fully responsible for himself or herself, so if he or she makes an effort, they can decide for themselves how their life should develop. They can do this at the latest when they start their self-education from the 7th year of age and tend to their developing interests. From this time on, then, the human being is already able to consciously decide for himself or herself, and also consciously perceive their interests. Although this process begins at a young age, the actual form of self-education is only known from the 7th year of life. That is one thing, that the human being carries the freedom in every respect to determine about himself or herself their education and interests in life, as well as with regard to their thoughts, feelings, and their consciousness orientation. In addition, however, since the existence of religions and sects, the fact that even the children are already afflicted by their educators with erroneous religious and sectarian teachings and forced into their nonsense, along with the fact that the hereditary disposition of the faith cooperates, that the person generally develops into a religious faith. These are things that are obviously not clear to you, just as it is not clear to you that the human being is subject to social norms, which he or she can only get rid of through his or her own initiative if they have the motivation, courage, energy, and strength to do so. But the power of the social norm is usually more powerful than the individual human being, and therefore they are subject to it, as well as to religious or sectarian beliefs, which are crammed into them in many guises, because belief is a genetic trait that goes back to the parents. What you write in paragraph 2 about true changes cannot be left standing as it is a Vedic nonsense, because neither by practical exercises nor by anything else can an expansion of the individual spirit to the cosmic spirit take place. So no concrete experience of the all-pervading, eternal state of being, Atma, Brahman, is possible. Truly, the human being has no influence whatsoever on the individual spirit, because it is inviolable and therefore cannot be manipulated or influenced in any other wise by the human. The spirit of the human being, the individual spirit or the spirit form, is a tiny part piece of a purely creational nature, in full independence. Therefore it lives only according to the creational laws of moderation and evolves itself according to the evolution of the consciousness, whereby the latter cannot exert any conscious or unconscious influence on the spirit. Therefore, it is also nonsensical to call the whole thing a concrete experience of the all-pervading, eternal state of being, the universal existence, because such a state is only inherent in the all-encompassing creation, the universal consciousness, and this state cannot be reached by the human being under any circumstances or even grasped intellectually. Thus, the consciousness, which you equate with the spirit in incomprehension, cannot be impregnated with this new experience, even with a little practice, which is repeatedly dipped into the color being and put into the sun or exposed to activity, so that the color being remains stable even under the most adverse circumstances. By the way, you obviously do not know this either. The being, as you write it, means the material life, that is to say, the material existence, while being means the true existence of the creation, as well as of the absolute forms and the being absolute, thus determining the spelling of what is actually spoken about. Moreover, it is impossible for the human being to live in the cosmic creational, for there is only one such state of being, whereby the state of being is probably meant, or even to achieve it, for this high value is only inherent in and possible for creation and all absolute forms. So it is also not possible for humans to reach such a state through a transcendental meditation technique. Contrary to your claim that such a state of being, which you erroneously call a state of being, has been preserved for humans by a Vedic tradition of India, which is not based on faith, philosophy and religion, or does not presuppose them, and that everything is purely based on the inner laws of the human mind. This is an unparalleled error. It has been explained several times that the human spirit, as being of a creational origin, is a tiny part piece of the spirit of the creation in humans. And this spirit, or human spirit form, animates the material consciousness as well as the entire material body. So, what you are addressing as the individual spirit of humans is in reality his material consciousness, which is of course responsible for evolution, from which all thoughts and from which, in turn, the feelings arise, as well as all forms of ideas, of action and accomplishment of deeds, all forms of motivation and will, and of course also all forms of meditation. That peace meditation in large groups has a positive effect on many things is a well-known fact, which has been known since time immemorial. However, the precondition must be that an ancient and solely effective formula is used in peace meditation, which was lost in the Indian Vedic teachings thousands of years ago and is kept in an ancient language, which is always present in the subconsciousness of all people through impulses from the memory banks. In fact, in relation to a peace meditation, just as in any other mass-oriented meditation, it is necessary to have the appropriate subconscious knowledge of the meditation material, so that receptive and comprehensible impulses can appear in a person in such a relationship, otherwise it will not work. Therefore, if you write that meditations have been performed in large groups of thousands of people in one place, and have brought about earth-shattering changes, because if a sufficiently large number of people radiate the experience of universal existence, of omnipresent being, of all-embracing consciousness in one place, the collective consciousness automatically changes too, and there is a constant neutralization of the negative and growth of positive social tendencies. This has been reported historically in India over and over again, and can be proved today by scientific experiments, then the whole thing is based on factors of faith on your part, and on all those who also believe in it. Because these forms, as they are described by you, belong to the realm of fantasy and illusion as well as to esotericism, because truth and reality look completely different. To this day, there are no provable scientific experiments of the kind you describe, because such claims are only pseudoscientific proofs which do not stand up to real scientific investigation. If great meditations are practiced, such as a peace meditation, which can only be done effectively with a very large number of people, then no earth-shattering changes will result, but only individual values in humans who are somehow open to them and who are able to perceive the impulses from the memory banks via the subconscious, always provided that the impulses from the memory banks are actually received by the subconscious and correctly implemented. So it does not mean that the whole collective subconscious block of the human being responds to such meditations, but only individual humans. And they are really not able to bring about any earth-shattering changes that would be visible in a short time. It is a fact that in the form mentioned above, only isolated people react to a great meditation and then start to work slowly within themselves, seeking self-knowledge and self-realization, and then, when they have found these and the laws of life and truth, first slowly build up everything within themselves in order to then live it within themselves as well as outwardly. This is the true path of evolution of consciousness, but not the nonsense and pseudo-scientific, pseudo-spiritual, divine, and confusing heresies of the Vedic, Christian or other religious, sectarian, and esoteric fairy tales, legends, fables, falsifications, deceptions, fantasies, and illusions. Billy.
Readers' questions uncorrected original questions.
Your spiritual teaching is very similar to the Indian Vedanta E. Yes, Lash, described in Yog Vasishta, and the most powerful force and energy of this. Creation universal existence described by you is called Shakti in the Indian Puranas, and is described there very comprehensively. A question about that man can evolve by error alone. This means that a human being must make mistakes if he or she wants to learn. Are not the Eastern wisdom teachings, eh? Jia. Bhagavad Gita. A bit further here when they say that you can also learn through success. And that is when you act based on being and thus always do everything correctly in accordance with the overall evolution. This has always been the case with the people in Satyuga, one of 4 time periods. One more question about the origin or development of the human being. In the Indian Puranas, possibilities are also described that the manas comparable to the wisdom kings directly create humans and other forms themselves. Also, the highest active and evolutionary consciousness has the power there to create humans and other beings instantaneously. What do you think about this? And a question about your remarks on reincarnation. The Puranas also describe rare possibilities of temporary human rebirth in animal bodies, where the spirit form can be aware of its previous incarnation, and where the animal form is sitting in the past human violations of natural laws, sometimes as a result of being cursed by other people, or by clinging to certain thoughts of an animal form in the last moment of human life. Is there such a thing? And last question, from your description. For the new life is not built on the burdens or burdens of the former life. For these were coped with in their entirety. In the former life the question arises. Often life ends abruptly, without having had time to cope with obvious mistakes or burdens. You do start again where you left off, right? Johannes Buchholz, Germany.
Answer. What you are comparing in terms of the spiritual teaching and the Indian Vedanta has already been explained in context, so there is nothing more to say about it. Regarding the fact that you think that the Eastern wisdom teachings are further than the spiritual teachings, you cut your fingers tremendously, because what you write is a question about that the human can only evolve by making mistakes. This means that a human being has to make mistakes if he wants to learn something. Are not the Eastern wisdom teachings E? G. Bhagavad Gita, a bit further here when they say that you can also learn through success. And that is when you act based on being, and thus always do everything correctly in accordance with the overall evolution. This has always been the case with the people in Satyuga, one of 4 periods, corresponds to a pseudo-scientific error and absurdity unparalleled. The Eastern wisdom teaching E. G. Bhagavad Gita is an extremely regrettable nonsense and a horrendous ignorance of the true facts, because one cannot learn from success, but effectively only from mistakes. Success comes only from mistakes made or from the development of learning, whereby learning is always connected with making mistakes. Once success has been achieved and something new and further is to be created from it, then the same process takes place again through learning and making mistakes. So the development is that of perception, cognition, cognizance, knowledge, its practical experience, and again its lived experience and the resulting wisdom, whereby wisdom is also evaluated as success. But the wisdom, that is to say, the success, cannot simply be extended as such, because in order to achieve an extension of it, it is inevitably necessary to look for a continuation and extension out of the wisdom, that is to say, out of the success, which, however, is connected with the fact that one learns anew and new mistakes are made, recognized and corrected, namely, with regard to the whole development from perception to wisdom, that is to say, success. Surely this should also be clear to a person who has fallen into a false faith and false teachings. With regard to the Manas, which can in any wise be compared to Ishvishs or wisdom kings, even these fantasy figures cannot create other forms themselves. It is also absurd that the highest active and evolutionary consciousness has the power to create people and other beings instantaneously, because such a creation is only in the power of the creation, and furthermore, such a process is not instantaneous, but only slow, because it is in the order of time and evolution. It is incomprehensible that beings endowed with rationality, as just humans, can believe a nonsense, that it is different, that simply gods and such like feeble-minded fantasy figures can create, that is to say, produce humans and other beings, and that still instantaneously. The truth is that living forms of life such as humans, animals, creatures, birds, fish, worms, beetles and insects, etc., can produce offspring through an act of mating or copulation, after which a certain time passes until birth takes place. Creation with its actions and its possibilities is the model for this. But that anyone who indulges in religious, delusional, sectarian, and fraudulent or schizophrenic religious and sectarian heresies and scorns the effective truth is more than just regrettable. With regard to the descriptions of reincarnation in the following wise, in the Puranas, rare possibilities of temporary human rebirth in animal bodies are also described, where the spirit form may be aware of its previous incarnation, and where the animal form may have served previous human offenses against natural laws, sometimes as a result of being cursed by other people, or by clinging to certain thoughts of an animal form in the last moment of human life. Is there such a thing? I am actually not surprised that you simply accept all this nonsense and imbecility without hesitation and believe what you have written and are obviously impressed and biased by it. But no, it is really pure nonsense that a human spirit form can reincarnate into an animal form, neither as a result of previous human infringements, nor as a result of being cursed by other people, nor by clinging to certain thoughts of an animal form in the last moment of human life. With regard to these things, I would like to recommend my book, Rebirth, Life, Dying, Death and Sorrow. The question from your description. The new life is not built on the burdens or unburdens of the former life, because these were mastered in their entirety in the former life. The question arises. Often life ends abruptly, without having had time to master obvious mistakes or burdens. You start again where you left off, right? Of course, the human being begins their new life where the last one left off. The exact facts can be found in the above-mentioned book, Rebirth, Life, Dying, Death and Sorrow, which is recommended to read and study, because it describes all the things and facts that provide exhaustive information on the whole subject of all your questions concerning rebirth, the hereafter, etc., etc. With this, I want to end my long but necessary answer to your questions, and I want to tell you that I cannot continue to get involved in such questions on your part, because everything is far too time-consuming and keeps me from important work I have to do. Because I'm not a super-sensible, supernatural god of Vedic, Christian, other religious, esoteric or sectarian character who can perform alleged miracles. For my part, I am only a simple proclaimer of the truth, and also a simple human being, who cannot do his work with allegedly supernatural energies and powers, but with normal human energy and power, whereby I have to do everything by myself in absolutely my own effort, motivation and initiative, without having any gods, angels, demons or spirits at my side to give me orders or channel with me, let alone being a medium to whom everything is simply chewed up and dictated, as is the case with charlatans, cheats and schizophrenics, and other delusional persons of both sexes. Furthermore, I would like to add that I think that my words will fall on deaf ears and will be met with incomprehension and rejection, since you are obviously completely caught up in the Vedic heresies. Billy.
You have taken a lot of trouble and said everything necessary, really Solomon-like, if I may say so, with regard to the fact that you have found the right words in dealing with the difficult explanations. Of course, there would be much more to explain, but that would be too much of a good thing. Your explanations are very good and also sufficiently detailed so that nothing more is necessary to explain. I think it will fall on deaf ears with the questioner anyway, as you say, because he is obviously caught up in the Vedic heresies.
I think so, too, but I think that normally one question is always worth an answer. But I will not go into further questions from the man, as I have also written, because I think that every word which I have already written as an answer is carried into the sea of ignorance and incomprehension. It would be the same with further explanations.
For which, as usual, you have taken great pains and taken a lot of time for this.
That is part of my missionary work. But tell me, you wanted to explain something to me today about predictions. Could you also say something about climate change and so on?
I will do that right away. First of all, I would like to remind you of what I have said before, namely that with regard to climate change, it is already too late to stop the whole thing. For too long, your and our warnings to the earthly governments and to earthly humankind have been ignored, so that now it is not even possible to limit the damage. The truth is that 2007 is a year of extremes in terms of climate change and the resulting massive snow and torrential rainstorms, droughts, cold spells, violent storms, landslides, avalanches and floods, as well as forest fires. Fires, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and seaquakes, with more and more people losing their lives and enormous destruction taking on ever more serious forms as natural disasters occur. Further increasing evils are directly resulting from the lust for power of irresponsible and warmongering state powers and their vassals, as well as advocates, and from the rapidly increasing overpopulation, such as crime, environmental destruction, pollution, climate destruction. War, laws, and regulations enslaving people, wrong political decisions, as well as intrigues and machinations against the freedom and security of individual human beings, peoples, and states. Crimes, acts of terrorism, family dramas, destruction of interpersonal relationships, religious sectarianism, prostitution, the extinction of many species and genera of animals, birds, fish, and wildlife, as well as the general effeminacy of human beings and the inability of men to procreate, will also become prevalent, as will murder, suicide, and intrigue. And new epidemics are appearing, as well as an increase in diseases and suffering among young and old. In particular, there will also be an increase in psyche diseases, a general indifference and brutalization of humans against humans, animals, creatures, and nature. Further, however, racial hatred, anti-Semitism and xenophobia, jealousy, hatred as well as revenge and vindictiveness, dishonesty, religious, esoteric, occult, spiritualist delusions and corresponding cults and acts, etc., etc., for in their search for the real, creational truth and in their search for the creational laws, terrestrial human beings are becoming increasingly addicted to sectarian, occult, and spiritualist charlatanism and false political machinations. Only with difficulty will a few human beings slowly find their way to the real creational natural truth in the coming time, because the Earth humans are too much caught up in their inherited belief in religious, esoteric, spiritualist charlatanry, occult as well as false philosophical sects and religions, and thus are unable to recognize the creational law-based truth and consequently cannot free themselves from it. Because their inherited and manic belief in many nonsensical false teachings which they accept and practice as true holds them captive with the claws of evil.
Well said, with the claws of evil. So then the future looks bleak with regard to your prediction in these relationships. But what about a third world war? Has anything new come up since the warmonger bush was put on the chain?
As I told you before, we do not look far into the future anymore, but only a few weeks or months. But what will happen regarding a third world war, time will have to prove. At least last year, such a danger averted itself, when in the USA the Democrats won the elections and countered the power mania and sectarianism of decaying U.S. presidents. What the future will bring in this respect is to be awaited, whereby it is to be hoped that the previous course of the U.S. war opponents will be maintained, and that the same will be done with all other peoples of the earthly states. Because the danger of world war will be reduced more and more, and thus the prophecies concerning their fulfillment can be averted. At the moment, the situation looks good for this, whereby it is to be hoped that it will also remain so.
One should not hope, because hopes very often bring disappointments.
You know how to interpret my words.
Of course, the meaning of your word hope means that for now, confidence can be maintained.
That is the meaning of my speech. Unfortunately, however, confidence will not remain because other mad statesmen, such as the U.S. President George W. Bush, will come to power and will exercise terror in the form of wars, death penalty, intrigue, etc.
This is something that is not only to be feared, but will become fact. I also have a reader's question about this, which I will read out here.
Question: how do you see it, Billy, with regard to aid to third world countries? Is this being handled correctly by the industrialized countries or their aid organizations? And what about arms supplies to third world countries, where the people in their own countries are killing themselves with the weapons? Pitt Zimmermann, Switzerland.
I answered the question as follows.
Answer. Neither the governments nor the aid organizations of the industrialized countries are acting in the right form and wise. Because the truth is that the people of the third world countries are being stuffed with food and all kinds of useless technical junk, which they have no use for. The whole of the aid organizations is built on a false humanism, which rests in false compassion and brings no benefit, but makes the humans of the third world countries dependent on aid and on the industrialized countries, instead of leading them to self-help and independence. In addition to these aid organizations, however, we must also mention the criminals who are in power, the state leaders and their vassals and supporters, as well as the criminal arms industry, which, like the powerful, is responsible for war, terror, and intrigue, because it supports war and the trade in war weapons and profits financially from it, and supplies war weapons to war zones and third world countries. However, all the humans in the third world countries do not need weapons, but a true and good development aid in such a wise that they are taught to help themselves or to be able to work themselves out of their underdevelopment and misery by their own efforts. For this, however, it is not simply necessary to provide food aid to satisfy people's hunger, but it is necessary to provide them with technical means and seeds, etc., through which they can grow and harvest their own food and build up their own industrial plants and benefit from them, if they are taught the necessary know-how about everything. All of them do not need weapons with which only war and murder is waged, but they need effective help for the cultivation and production of their own food and for obtaining clean drinking water, as well as help for technical and other real economic construction and general progress, to which the evolution of consciousness also belongs. Without these values, all development aid is useless and only like a drop on a hot stone.
A true word, but which is not respected by those responsible for the earthly states, nor by those who give false developmental aid and make the human beings of the third world countries dependent on it.
It has indeed become somewhat quiet in regard to the bird flu. So here and there, however, short reports do appear in the newspapers, especially about the dead in the Far East who have died as a result of the H5N1 virus. Do you in the meantime know more about this epidemic and its possible spread?
That is actually the case. The cat family, in particular house cats, gain a greater significance because they are very susceptible to the virus and can pass the epidemic on to other animals, whereby new mutations arise, which ultimately can also spread to humans. Already, many house cats in the Asiatic region are infected by the virus, whereby they can cause the named danger to spread out.
Then how could the virus emerge and spread itself so quickly in the realm of the humans?
The virus is already very old, yet it was restricted to a certain kind of migratory bird which was immune to it. That was good for a while until this kind of bird inevitably mixed with other migratory birds and also infected them. The inevitable happened as a result of the fault of the overpopulation of Earth humans, because, through their spreading out, they destroyed the regions of the types of bird, also the region of the type of bird which is infected with the H5N1 virus, which, however, was immune to it. Subsequently, these sought out other regions for nourishment and inevitably came into contact with diverse other migratory birds, which led to the spreading out of the epidemic, which already years ago spread to domestic poultry as well as to mammals. Also, a number of humans were contaminated with the H5N1 virus through direct contact with infected domestic poultry, whereby they died, which also will not further be avoidable.
Therefore, the epidemic has existed for a very long time already, yet it could only spread itself out through the guilt of the human being of the earth. And indeed, therefore, because they did not take their overpopulation in hand and thereby deprived the migratory birds of their established areas, whereby the bird world mixed, naturally not genetically, rather in regard to the migratory areas, the nourishment, and the excrement. That is as I see it at any rate.
Which is also correct. But now let me give you a brief report of what is predicted to happen. In Indonesia, a seaquake of magnitude 6.6 will occur off Sulawesi in the near future, but it will not cause a tsunami because there are no significant undersea displacements.
Wait a minute. Our scientists always talk about earthquakes, even seaquakes. We have talked about it before, but it is not very clear because you make a difference between seaquakes and earthquakes.
That is true, because a seaquake is such that it shakes the submarine mantle of the earth and the waters of the sea, whereas an earthquake shakes the mantle of the earth and the crust of the earth up to the surface and causes tremendous damage to the surface, especially to human achievements, but often very many human lives are lost. Seaquakes, on the other hand, are very deep and, in the worst case, lead to submarine fault lines and tsunamis, which can, of course, also destroy human achievements and claim human lives.
It is clear now. Some time ago, if I may ask a question again, you said that U.S. Secret Services are manipulating the internet and the computer world, which I also hinted at in a bulletin about the CIA, and that Microsoft is also involved with the Windows system. Can you tell me which U.S. Secret Service at Microsoft is involved in this, along with the CIA, even if it is also involved?
The Windows program system is manipulated by the U.S. Secret Service NSA, the National Security Agency, and other secret services. The manipulation enables the secret services to penetrate any computer unrecognized and at will, to extract data from it, or to make changes and falsifications to the existing data without being recognized.
Can you tell me anything regarding the health of Cuban leader Fidel Castro? Recently it has been said that his illness is getting worse and worse, and that he will not live to see the end of January. At least that is what the U.S. Secret Service CIA claims.
This is an intrigue of the CIA, which is trying to make the Cubans in exile in the USA, as well as the population in Cuba, uneasy in order to be able to benefit the USA. Fidel Castro is truly improving and stabilizing his health, which will enable him to enter the month of February with renewed strength. At least that is certainly the case until the 3rd of February, because up to that day I have been making a forecast with regard to him.
Are there any other unusual things or events up to the 3rd of February that you have predicted?
There is nothing more to report, except that we have now clearly seen that various people at the UN are also reading your bulletins and special bulletins, which means that relevant people are now taking your warnings and our discussions about climate destruction. And the fact that the point has been passed that something useful can still be done about the global warming and climate destruction that has been going on for some time. At last, attention is being paid to your and our warnings and statements, but it is not admitted that the official concerns about global warming and climate destruction, which will henceforth be discussed publicly, while openly admitting that the Earth human being is to blame for it all, are due to your and our warnings and statements. This is because those responsible appear before the people and want to be great and cannot admit that it is not they who have gained decisive insights. Just as the powerful and responsible ones of the world ignored and disregarded your call to all the responsible ones of the world in 1951, and your warning to all the governments of Europe in 1958. So today, the powerful and responsible ones of the world, ignore and disregard the fact that it was you and we who for decades have been making the predictions about global warming and climate destruction. That is what I wanted to say. But now it is time for me again, and I will not see you again until you are 70 years old. Until then, goodbye, my friend.
Bye, Ptaah, Salome.